This is Tokens. I'm Lee C. Camp.
I think I tried to steep this record in truth. My interpretation of what truth is.
That's our guest for today, Country Music Hall of Famer Vince Gill. One of the contributing factors to the start of Tokens' show years ago was my experience as a professor. I'd lecture on some social condition and a student would mention Bob Dylan or Woody Guthrie or Switchfoot. The students implicitly understood that the songwriters were, just as Vince said, trying to steep their songs in truth. And truth-telling is always challenging work.
It took every ounce of courage I had to sing this song.
And yet, such courage, of course, often leads to some terrible fun, even in some unexpected ways.
I mean, I must say it was really cool to be that hated, that despised, and booed that loudly. And the anger that came from those 4,000 or 5,000 people was hysterical sounding.
Our conversation ranged widely and yet was deeply personal. We discussed why Vince has been writing songs of late about teen pregnancy, racial animosity, and sexual abuse, his own temper and his journey in understanding that temper, his public confrontation of the Westboro Baptist Church, and a question about his high-profile marriage.
No pressure there, huh?
Our interview with Vince Gill coming right up. Vince Gill, winner of 21 Grammy Awards, more than any other solo male artist, sold over 26 million albums. Early on was frontman for Pure Prairie League in the 1970s, and I must say that Let Me Love You Tonight was kind of like one of the soundtracks of my boyhood in the late 70s.
I wouldn't tell anybody that.
And as a solo artist beginning in 1983, he's recorded more than 20 studio albums, charted over 40 singles on the U.S. Billboard charts, been honored by the Country Music Association with 18 CMA awards, including 2 Entertainer of the Year awards, 5 Male Vocalist awards, inducted in 2007 into the Country Music Hall of Fame. And in 2017, Vince joined the Eagles in place of the late Glenn Frey. Vince, it's great to be with you.
Good to see you again, buddy.
Good to see you.
Been too long.
Yeah. Thanks so much for letting me come out and be with you. I love your place here.
This is a good spot. This is a good place to get quarantined.
Yes, I bet it is.
We've got a pool, so we're good.
It's a beautiful place to create and I would imagine sing and write and think.
It really is. I put a studio in the house. Amy and I have been married 20 years now, and when I put the studio in the house, it's the first time that music ever really existed in my home, other than when I was a kid. And I didn't, sit around playing a lot and didn't, sit around write songs and stuff. But the fact that creativity came within the walls of our home was pretty powerful, and a lot of great musicians and tracking records in here, and I've produced a bunch of records in here. And so when creativity is 15 feet away from my bedroom, it's awesome.
That's pretty sweet.
Yep.
That's lovely. Recently released your 15th studio album called Okie.
Yes.
And on various reviews are calling it things like your most personal songs yet. How do you see this album as kind of in the trajectory of your life's work? Any particular kind of notion about how you frame it yourself, about what you did in that album?
Well, I think I tried to steep this record in truth, my interpretation of what truth is, and whether someone will agree with it or won't agree with it was not the point, and it's difficult to take opinions and put them out there, and there's going to be slings and arrows. Yeah. And at this point in life, I'm not worried about the slings and arrows. I just hope that they understand the intention. The beauty to me of a great song is one that doesn't tell you how you should think or what you should do or how you should act or anything. All it is here's a topic that's worthy of a discussion.
Yeah.
And it can be a hard discussion. And some of the subjects were things that you don't write songs about, per se.
At first, I was kind of taken aback with that. Really? He's doing a song about that? And then the next one, he's doing a song about that? And then, he's doing one about that?
I know. But, I think more than anything, it's age appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't think songs like this coming out of me at 20 years old would have had any validity.
Yeah.
but 63 years of life, of living and saying and doing a lot of different things, it kind of, to me, it holds a little more water that way.
For example, some of the ones, so those who haven't listened to your album yet.
There's plenty.
Yeah. So you got what choice will you make about teen pregnancy? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And to me, I wrote that with a woman named Leslie Satcher, and I know Leslie. I know how she feels, and so it was very important to me that not be conveyed in the song. I said, what I want to do is open this up for this to happen, but we don't, as songwriters, button it up and end it and say you did this or you didn't do that. We just leave it in the moment. That's how I've always lived my life. I think from day one is all I cared about the moment I was in. I didn't care about down the road and didn't look back with a lot of whatever. And so I think that's the beauty of that song, is that it's not, we talked about it before we turned on the tape. It's not judgmental.
Yeah.
It's just, here it is. And these are real things that happen in life, that sometimes people, I guess they shy away from having that discussion. It's one of the most polarizing topics that our country faces.
Yeah. In one interview I think you were doing about this particular album, you said something like, an artist doesn't have to tell all the truth all the time, but instead can tell a story. And I love that, because I mean one of the I think failings of academics that can contribute to kind of polarization is that sometimes we feel like we've got to tell all that we think is true all the time, and sometimes it's good just to be quiet or tell a story and let people ruminate about what they might do in that given situation.
Yeah, I mean the thing about songs though is they don't have history.
Yeah.
They don't need to define history and explain how everything got to the place it got.
Yeah.
And to me, a song can be anything it wants to be. It is an infant thing. It's brand new. And I just feel like you can take it any way you want to take it. And all you need is just a shred of inspiration, a shred of truth in it, and that, truthfully, what happens is oftentimes whatever's inspired the song is not interesting enough to write a whole song about. So you need to kind of, hey, I got to kind of milk this, shape this, twist it, into a way that all of a sudden it's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes the truth is the truth, but maybe it's not very interesting.
Yeah. Another one you have on there that was moving to see, Forever Changed.
Oh yeah, a sexual abuse song, and that's really been powerful to see a handful of people get to respond to that song, that something like that has happened to.
Yeah,
they felt like somebody stuck up for them, somebody had a voice for them, and I like things to be fair, and I'll stick up for the people that I think are being treated unfairly every time. And, there, once again, we talked about all you need is a shred of truth. And that's all that song had, was a shred of truth from me. I had a basketball coach, gym teacher in the 7th grade that tried to molest me. And I'm a 7th grade kid. I don't know anything about anything, no 7th grader does.
Yeah.
And I was lucky in that what he was doing before it got crazy, I said, this ain't happening. So I jumped up and I ran. So I survived what could have potentially been a life-changing event. But that little shred of truth was real.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like a hypocrite in taking that little shred of truth and then maybe finding a story to sing for folks that didn't happen quite so lucky. They weren't as lucky as I was.
Yeah. I think it's powerful in that, again, you're telling a story and it allows people to enter into the pain, enter into the possibility of how things could be different for themselves. I mean, I had a similar kind of experience as a kid when older boy, and for a number of years attempted that kind of mess. And similarly, for whatever reason was able to say no, or, no, we're not doing this or whatever. And then one of those things that I probably didn't talk about And I don't know that I knew enough to make sense of what had happened to me as a 10-year-old until you know, a long time ago. But I think allowing spaces like that where publicly accessible places that, again, without the shame or shaming and can just put that out there, I think it's a real gift to do that for people.
I think so. You know, and once again, I think these kinds of subjects, it's all about the intention that you have the conversation with. Intention is everything to me. If you understand my intention in the writing of that song, I'm probably a lot less likely to offend you, make you mad, or make you judge me or hate me or whatever. I know my truth and I know my intention, and I'm not afraid to then say you shouldn't tackle that subject.
Yeah.
I think every subject should be welcome of a conversation.
Yeah. Another one that is on there that I think probably wouldn't have worked for you as a 20-year-old is the song in which you're, as a man, talking about, is it entitled Honest Man?
Oh, yeah. An honest man.
Yeah, An Honest Man, where you're talking about keeping one's wedding vows and marriage vows. And it's a beautiful, beautiful kind of call as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's I think a lot of times people are afraid to be vulnerable, you know, and at this point of life, I'm not, you know, I've got a lot less left than I've had to this point. And, you know, I think Willie Nelson was a big influence in the making of this record in a small way, in that when he made Redheaded Stranger, it was so against the grain of what everybody did. You know, it's just this pared down, great singer, great song. And that's all there was to it. And that was the point of this record, was to never let anything get in the way of the singer and the song and the lyric that you're trying to convey. And so it wound up being a little more information than maybe I'd had in my head when I thought about doing this record. But it seems appropriate, you know, enough that to where if something started poking out, or I'd go, don't want that, you know, and so we just kind of operated with that mentality, and it was, you know, it was really fun for me in that I wasn't trying to sing, you know, with this bravado voice and great, you know, range and hard, you know, it's just like, I'm just going to tell a story and not even sing real hard. I don't think I really sang one song on the record with any gusto, and that was When Miami Prays. But the rest of it is all, I wanted to be like Guy Clark. I want to be a storyteller, John Prine, those kinds of guys.
You know, talking about that Guy Clark song, I think one of the things that really, I've known this, I've been in Nashville long enough to know this, but the ways in which those of you all who have given yourselves to a lifetime of the craft of songwriting and music making, you're able, like in that Guy Clark song, you're able to quote, I don't know of a better word, quote Guy Clark. I'm not talking about the lyrics, I'm talking about it musically. You're like quoting Guy Clark, and it's like all immediately Guy Clark is in the song with you. And it's just amazing how you guys learn to do this in a community and a tradition of music making. That I think is a beautiful reality about the community of music making.
Well, I think that it's part and parcel to why that tribute to him is powerful. Is because it is him.
Yeah.
You know, it's exactly how we played the Randall Knife when I recorded that song with him 40 years ago. And it's the same melody.
Yeah.
He used that melody on Randall Knife and also Let 'Em Roll. You know, so that's him. That guitar styling that starts is verbatim from those two songs. The one thing I'm not crazy about in tribute songs is where there's clever titles of that person's songs, and so these are so deep into the psyche of Guy and his songs, and that you'd have to be a massive Guy Clark fan to even know who Coleman Bonner was, to know who Rita was, you know, in this song. So it's all. My favorite memory of that song was when Guy passed. We were going to go have a memorial for him in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Rodney went, Emmy, Steve Earle, and Joe Ely, and Lyle, and I don't know who all, just you know, every hipster. We got there, and then it was Guy's wishes were to have his ashes be put in a sculpture. And this guy Terry was going to do the sculpture, and and I was an old friend of Guy's. And so the night before, I'd written this song, and I showed it to Rodney. I said,
"You had written this song that's on the album?"
Yeah, the same song. Nothing like a Guy Clark song. And I said, Rodney, will you listen to this and tell me if I'm an idiot, if this is just reeks of horribleness, And he listened. He said, I would only change one thing. He said, Guy, it was an old blue shirt, not an old work shirt. I said, okay. And he said, and take my name out of the end of it. It's because, it says SOB. Rodney's going to miss you, Guy, at the very end. And so I told him I would, but then when I recorded it, I didn't.
It's in there. Yeah.
But the other thing
Have you heard from him about that?
Oh, he loves it. I made him cry when he heard it. That was high praise, But what was amazing was we sat around and we were all, reminiscing and telling Guy stories and all this, and everybody started passing the guitar around. And I don't quite see myself in their ilk as far as one of those great real storyteller songwriter guys, like Guy and like Rodney and like Lyle and Steve and those guys. So they passed the guitar to me and they said, what do you think God want to hear you do? And it took every ounce of courage I had to sing this song, something that I'd come up with without it reeking of arrogance and who do you think you are? But man, it just moved everybody in the room. And Tamara Saviano, she's the one that wrote Guy's book, basically a biography of Guy's life. And she called me the next day and she says, for months and months and months, I haven't been able to write the ending of what I want the last thing to be in this book. Can I use that lyric? I said, please do.
Wow.
And so that meant a lot to me. But I, with a straight face, Guy wrote every word of that song.
Yeah.
And most every note of it too.
Yeah.
But it's a sweet tribute to an old friend.
It's a wonderful tribute. Yeah, it really is. And then last one I could not mention in talking about this new album, the Merle Haggard tribute. And I was thinking driving over here, I think that the two country folks I listened to the most growing up were Don Williams and Merle Haggard. And then rock was the Eagles. And I had a LP of that. I don't remember the title of the album, but it was one that had Desperado as the last track on that album.
Well, an interesting bit of trivia. That's the first song Don and Glenn ever wrote together. Desperado.
That's incredible.
Oh, that was I called BS. Don told me. I went to the first rehearsals and we were getting everything going and this and that. And I said, man, shoot me straight. What's the first song you and Glenn ever wrote? And he smiled at me and he goes, Desperado. And I go, no way. I said, you had to write some crappy songs first. And he started laughing. He goes, no, that was the first song we ever wrote. I said,
that's amazing.
That was meant to be then. That was meant to be.
You're not kidding.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no. That's a wonderful bit of trivia. But Merle, I mean, it's just, he's meant a lot to you, I suppose.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. He was I've heard Charlie Worsham describe me as his North Star, and he was certainly mine.
Yeah.
And I just loved everything. I loved everything about him, and I often wonder how he wrote those songs that he did that were just so much more poignant than everybody else's Little Darling songs, for the era. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that he'd been to prison and then he had his freedom taken away from him. It gave him a different perspective than anybody else really had.
He seemed to have a poignancy of pain about the songs that was real.
You think about, what was beautiful in his songs was the depth of despair.
Yeah.
And always with some hope.
Yeah.
I turned 21 in prison doing life without parole. No one could steer me right, but Mama tried. There's your hope. It's just like you want to define country music. It's right there. That's it.
Or Silver Wings, the kind of longing of loss.
Melancholy.
Yeah. It's just amazing that he could do all that. So,
I know it. He's something. And once again, too, that's where I've always gone with grief is music. And, whether it was my brother or my father or whoever it's been that I was crazy about, I wanted not to have a commercial element of it. I never planned on recording Go Rest High on That Mountain. I just wanted to write it for grief, for losing my big brother. And Tony Brown heard it. And he says, you got to record this song. I said, man, it's too personal. I just don't think it would work. And boy, was I wrong,
Yeah.
Just one more time, I was wrong. But it's just important for people around other people to know how much they mattered to me.
Yeah.
That's really important to me. Always has been. And that's some dead on truth. If I got one last song to hear, I ain't picking mine. I'm picking the Mighty Merle.
So I grew up in Oklahoma. Did I hear that you tell me, what was your first song you ever performed?
I think it might have been The House of the Rising Sun.
That is hilarious.
In second grade, I think. They went over fourth grade. I don't know what grade it was, but I'd learned to play that and sing The House of the Rising Sun. And at that age, you don't know it's about house of ill repute, And so I knew the die was cast.
Of a life lost, yeah.
So I think the die was cast big time. This man was meant to be a melancholy music man.
And I remember, I can't remember the details, but I remember hearing you tell the story about you opened for Kiss.
Well, I was still in high school, and I was in a couple of bluegrass bands, and whatever day it was, somebody called and said, "Hey, can you get the band together and come down here and open a concert?" And I said, "Yeah, I can find enough guys. Everybody's going to make $50 or $100." I said, "Yeah, we can get down there." So I called and rattled around, and between the two bands, we made enough up to get a good little bluegrass band together, And so I go driving down to the Civic Center in Oak City, and I drive by the marquee, and I look at it, and it says, "Appearing tonight, Kiss." I go, "No way, we're going to open for Kiss," And I figured we were playing downstairs for a convention or something. And sure as hell, we had to go and open for Kiss in a bluegrass band.
That is hilarious.
And so we got out there and we didn't last 2 songs, and 3 songs, something like that. And I mean, I must say it was really cool to be that hated, that despised, and booed that loudly, and the anger that came from those 4,000 or 5,000 people was hysterical sounding, And boy, they start that stuff, and I said, "Thank y'all, we appreciate that. We got another one you're gonna like. You like that one, I just thick as I can put it on, and hey, thank you, we appreciate that too, So at the end, we didn't last, like I said, 3 songs, and so they started throwing beer bottles, and it started getting dangerous. So we ran off stage, but before we hit I looked at the crowd and I flipped them off, and I turned around and I didn't take my pants down, but I told them all to kiss what, and so the best part of the whole story was not that, but the review in the paper the next day was priceless, because it talked about the Kiss show, and they did this, and then all the this and that. It said, but the weird part of the evening was when local bluegrass band Mountain Smoke opened the show. Can't understand why that happened, and said they only lasted about 3 songs, and said group member Vince Gill on his departure flipped off the crowd and told them which part of his anatomy the crowd could kiss, in their big block letters. It was really great writing by that journalist. And so, it was a great experience for me. I loved it. I thought it was hysterical. I wasn't angry. I'd have been mad too if I'd had my face painted and wanted to go rock some guy threw a fiddle and banjo in my face. I'd be mad too. But years later, 5 years later, I wound up on the same label with them in L.A. when I was in Pure Prairie League, and I got to meet Paul Stanley, and I introduced myself. And I said, "Hey, do you remember years ago? Have any recollection of a gig you did in Oklahoma where a bluegrass band opened for you?" And he goes, "Yeah." I go, "I was in that band." We had the biggest laugh. So that was my brush with greatness.
That's a pretty great story. That's pretty funny.
It was only up from there,
So you come to Nashville, and I didn't know this until recently that you got invited to be a part of Dire Straits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you declined, obviously.
Well, probably not the smartest move I ever made, truthfully. In that period of life, it was like 1988 or 89, I think, somewhere in there. I had just signed with MCA, spent 7 years with RCA struggling, not really having much success. and I was struggling financially too, to make house payments and things like that. It wasn't easy. And so I get this call from Mark, and he asked me if I would have any interest in being in Dire Straits and coming and playing and singing. And I said, oh boy. He said, we're going on a world tour, and, it would have meant a great financial, boom for me. And I thought about it, and the musician in me wanted to do it, and the common sense thing in me wanted to do it. I said, this will help get me through a lean period. But in my heart, what really struck me was I told myself, I said, I hate to bail on country music. And if I do this, I think that'll take me out of the loop for a pretty good while. And I said, my ears don't lie to me. They tell me I'm a good enough singer and I'm a good enough player. I may not have had the right song at the right time yet, but I just think I have something to offer, that I think's legit. And I told myself, I said, if you don't bet on you, nobody else will. So I didn't take the sure thing, the guaranteed money and get myself out of trouble and all that. And I called Mark and I said, man, I don't know why I'm saying this, but I really have to try to hit my lick in this country music world, because I think I can, and I wound up working on his next record a lot, and that was, so I got to play with him and sing with him, and it was great fun. And then right after that, When I Call Your Name came out. And changed everything, but I had no reason to think that it would or that it was going to, because that first MCA record had 2 singles off of it before When I Call Your Name, and they kind of did like all the rest of them had done. They got a little bit of airplay, crawled up the charts, and I think first record got to 32 or something like that. The next one might have got top 10 or top 15. It was a duet with Reba. But that duet with Reba really did something. I've always been grateful to her, because that gave me a little more credibility with the radio crowd, because she was killing it at the time. And so then the next song was When I Call Your Name, and it just, blew the gates wide open.
What do you think, with all the experiences you've gotten to have, all these years, successes you've had? It seems from the outside that you work at practicing gratitude, and I hear you voice it a lot. What are ways that you try to practice gratitude or pay attention to, so that that stays in front of you?
Well, I think sadly what I hear often from people is that they're surprised that I'm nice. And in that, just the other day, just at the counter, and some gals came up, wanted to say hi and get a picture and all this stuff. And the guy sitting next to me goes, God, how do you deal with that? And I said, deal with it the opposite way about 3 or 4 times and see what people think of you. I said, it's just as easy to react with kindness. I really believe kindness is the key to every problem we might ever have as a being, and I think it would cure everything. I said, it takes me just as long to be nice as it would to be snarky. I don't like it. I don't like receiving arrogance. I don't like when somebody thinks they're better than me, above me, more important, richer, skinnier, whatever, wherever you want to go with that, in any way, shape, or form. And I think because I detest it so much, that's the last thing I'd ever want to be.
Yeah.
It's real simple. It's not. And it's not, I don't have to work on it. It's natural. Yeah. It feels, if somebody once says something good about me, they say he's the same guy he was when I met him when he was 17 or when he was 28 or whatever. That's all I could ever hope for. I think sometimes that people expect you to react to some notoriety or some wealth or some of those things. They can kind of expect you to, and when you're not what they perceive or expect, it kind of throws them for a loop too a little bit.
Did you find yourself along the way tempted with that?
No, I don't think so.
Why do you think not?
Probably because of my mom and daddy.
Huh.
They'd have worn my ass out.
You're listening to Tokens, Public Theology, Human Flourishing, and the Good Life. Most grateful to have you joining us. We'd love for you to go over and give us one of those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and subscribe there or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. And we would be most delighted if you would refer a friend who listens to podcasts to come over and join us on the Token Show podcast. And we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@tokensshow.com. Shout out today to a Tokens Show friend out west in the Navajo Nation and to the folks listening in Christchurch, New Zealand and Melbourne, Australia. If you'd like to see Vince performing on one of our live Tokens shows, check out the video link at tokenshow.com/podcast. Coming up, I talked to Vince about his legendary temper, his marriage to Amy Grant, and his infamous engagement with the Westboro Baptist Church, along with a few in-studio performances. You're listening to Tokens and our interview with Country Music Hall of Famer Vince Gill.
Somebody asked me to do a little blurb for Charlie Daniels, just recently passed, and said, "Can we have a quote?" And I said, "Well, when you're a kid and somebody you look up to is nice to you, you never, ever, ever forget it."
That's the truth, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I don't ever want to give anybody a chance to go, "God, that guy was wasn't very nice to me," you know. And so it was that way from 1976 to 2020. Every time I saw Charlie Daniels, he was nice to me.
Huh.
And so that's always meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny because so many of those friendships that I made in those days, you know, the camaraderie that went on in that bluegrass world was pretty unbelievable. Still friends with all those people I met when I was a teenager. Ricky and Marty Stewart, Jerry Douglas and J.D. Crow and you name it, you know, just all of us, the Whites. And it's such a great community, you know, and nobody gets too big-headed. There's not a whole lot to get big-headed about, you know.
What are other sorts of life practices or habits that help keep you centered?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty, you know, I'm a legendary hothead, you know, and that's cemented in most people's perception of me. But at the same time, I feel like the only things they can ever say negative about me is that I'm overweight and then I get mad on the golf course. That's not that much, so I'm okay with that. But I mean, so funny is I don't get mad anymore. I don't get that uptight on the golf course like I used to.
Yeah,
it was pretty legendary at the time, and I played golf with a sports psychologist just on a whim that he took care of guys like Payne Stewart, Corey Pavin, and he was their guy that helped them, you know, with all that psychology of being on the golf course and how to handle all that stuff. And we went out and played together, and this was at least 25 years ago, maybe. So we played a few holes, and I looked at him, I smiled, and I said, "Well, Doc," I said, "what do you think?" He started laughing. He said, "Yeah." He said, "I've heard a lot of stories about you." And I said, "Well, I know, you know, I own it. I'm okay with it." But I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he says, "I'm going to tell you something that's going to shock you." I said, "Okay." He said, "I'll bet your whole life, all you've ever received is people look down their noses at you for you losing your temper." Huh. And I said, "Yeah, that's true. You know, it's people see it as a severe negative, you know." And he said, "But here's the thing." He said, "The reason you have that in you is the reason you're successful."
Yeah.
He said, "It's the reason you're the singer you are and the musician you are, and all those things are because you have this fire in you and this burn in you that won't accept anything but your best kind of all the time." And he said, "All those other guys that give you all that crap," said, "they're all worse than you are." They just don't show it. They just don't show it.
They just suppress it.
They know how to suppress it. And he said, and he said, "Here's the other thing. You might be the only guy I would ever tell this to." He said, "But think about what you do every night for a living." He says, "You stand up in front of people. All you'll ever receive is adulation every time you finish a song." I said, "Well, you must have missed the Kiss concert." But he says, "That's not normal."
Yeah.
He said, "That's really not normal." He said, I think the reason that you have that in you is to keep you centered." He said, "For you, I think have
the defect in you helps keep you centered."
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, "I think for you, not everybody, but for you, I think will keep you level if you'll go beat yourself up if you need to. It's okay. And him and Amy are the only two people in my whole life that have ever said something constructive and positive about being emotional. You know, Amy, we played golf together, and this was before we were married, and with her managers, Mike and Dan, and we're out playing some golf course in California, and I hit a bad shot, and I stuck my 3-wood in the bag and broke the head off of it. And I went, "Oh, why'd you do that, you idiot?" You know, she turned around and looked at me, and I said, "I'm sorry about that." She goes, "That doesn't surprise me." I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well," she says, "you know, I'm crazy about you, and I watch everything you do." And she said, "When something's funny," I said, "nobody laughs harder than you. You know, you got the best sense of humor in the world." And said, "And I've seen you completely fall apart and cry in front of the whole world." She said, "Now you've hit a golf shot and you're upset." She goes, "You can't control any of your emotions." She said, "How would you ever expect to think that you could control one?" And I said, "Wow, that's a first." Sweet. And that's, you know, once again, treat some things with kindness instead of judgment, and all that kind of stuff. It could do a lot for people.
Yeah. I certainly always tried to suppress emotion, and it doesn't work too well, you know, long term. It's not very healthy. But I came across this line from Aristotle where he says, "The virtuous human being will be angry in the right way at the right time with the right intensity." At first I thought, in my snarky way, I thought, "Oh, well, thanks a lot." But then the more I thought about it, I was like, that's brilliant. You know, it's not the problem of emotions are not the problem. It's trying to figure out how that they can best serve us and serve the world and serve our neighbors. And, you know, so I like those stories a lot.
Yeah, I kind of do too. Yeah. I don't, you know, there's a part of me that wishes I didn't have it, but I don't know that I'd be the same cat if I didn't have that.
Well, you kind of opened up some of this. So let me ask this. What's it been like for you as the public Vince Gill, who doesn't go about touting public piety, to be married to the public Amy Grant, who has represented so much of American Christian culture making?
No pressure there, huh? Well, you know, truthfully, they were all pretty mad at me when we first got married.
Yeah.
You know, I took a lot of slings and arrows back then, so it's like, oh, well, I kind of already see the writing on the wall here. But, you know, once again, we talked about truth. We talked about honesty. We talked about all those kinds of things. And people just assume that I'm like her, that I had that same kind of upbringing. I didn't have church in my upbringing, you know, and it never was a part of my folks didn't go. And a lot of times I think that's what steers you towards things like that, you know, and so then I left home and I was always gone. I was working on weekends and so it's, you know, I think it's okay to be honest. It's pretty evident in a song on this new record called "When My Amy Prays," you know. I said, all my life I've known a Jesus, but that connection never came. That's pretty gutsy.
Yeah.
To say that.
It is pretty gutsy.
You know, but all that to say, you know, I just am who I am.
Yeah.
And if she's okay with it, I'm good.
I remember talking with you about this one night backstage at the Ryman. You were about to sing "Bread and Water," and you said something like, "I don't read theology or think about that stuff very much, but you have this sort of theological sensibility about you." Where that "Bread and Water" is one of the most beautiful depictions of what's supposed to be going on in the sacraments, you know. And "When My Amy Prays" is a great depiction of the biblical notion of church, where it's a community, and we all come to try to encounter God in different ways in different places. And a lot of times we receive this sort of intimacy with God through other people. And I think it's a beautiful depiction of that.
Yeah,
in that song.
and I think a lot of whatever spirituality I have inside of me, it comes from music. Everybody says, "Where do you go to church?" I say, "The Ryman." It was a church. That's what it was built for.
The Spirit's still hanging around.
But I had Bill Gaither, who's probably one of the most successful Christian writers of gospel songs that ever lived. And he pulled me aside and he said, "I love the way you write songs centered about faith." He says, they don't have all the God speak that we all
Right.
use and have. He said, you just tell your story, and it's really compelling in that way. And once again, it's not, one's not better than the other. My way's not better than his, or his isn't better than mine, or because he does this, he's I don't ever see it like that. Yeah. We all get here how we get here, and we're all a mess.
Yeah,
and own that instead of propping yourself up to, there's so much of all of that I always felt like a lot of people went to church back when I was a kid because of the social pressure. If you weren't a church-going family, back then, there'd be a lot of yakking about those people. I don't know. I don't have any answers.
Well, I think too, what you just said there about we're all a mess, and that's one of those things I think that also you kind of give us in a lot of these songs, is that you accept that we're all a mess, and rather than assuming there's some group that's not a mess, we start from this kind of beginning point of, look, we're all a mess. Right?
Yeah.
And that allows a sort of lack of judgment and all that. Both the legendary hothead and all of this kind of public piety stuff certainly brings up the Westboro Baptist story.
That just crawls all over me. Not that they're a Baptist church or they believe what they believe, but the cruelty with which they go to profess what they profess is that there's nothing about that that's redeeming. I don't think, and what was funny to me was when I went out there, I don't know what I was going to do out there, but they did have a couple of signs that I'd seen in the past calling Amy things that would have ended a good bit differently.
For those who don't know the story, you were at a show and they were protesting and you went out on the street.
And I just went out there and I think I kind of finished it off in one sentence when the girl got up in my face and started telling me everything I had done that was wrong, and what are you doing out here? And I just came out to see what hate looked like in the face, just wanted to see what hate looked like. That's all.
Yeah.
And that was really the end of it. There wasn't much more than that went on. But when those people would picket the funeral of a fallen soldier, or, just unspeakable cruelty in that. And then when I saw the signs firsthand, I remember years ago when Amy and I first got married, we were playing in Oklahoma City. We were doing a Christmas show, and we got picketed. And I was crushed. I was crushed that my hometown would do that to me. And then it dawned on me, it was them. So I recognized the graphic way that the way the font and everything about their signs were written. I said, that's exactly like the signs I saw all those years ago back home. So it told me it was them. Had to have been them.
Yeah.
And what I remember was I was leaving that place and I saw him out there, and my sister said, let me out. And I go, oh no. She's a way bigger redneck than me.
Well, in that sort of trying to figure out what a response to hate looks like, you've certainly done some storytelling both years ago and then here more of late in your storytelling way of trying to enter into the conversation around race.
Yeah, it's sad that it's a dangerous conversation to have, that it's a dangerous subject to raise. Because if you say the wrong thing, then you're painted as something else. And, I was the first white guy ever on the cover of Jet magazine. And I'm a creative guy. We didn't ever think about that kind of stuff. I love Chuck Berry. I loved Billie Holiday. I loved Ray Charles. I didn't care black or white. I just loved music. And my first big crush was a black teacher I had in 7th grade. The most beautiful woman I'd ever seen to that point in my life. They said we're all created equal. I believe it. And I try to live it, and I try to have that be my truth. And I don't know, I think once again we talked earlier about intention. I think people can say the wrong thing, but their intention is not as hateful and as racist as sometimes it's taken, but they do it not out of spite and out of that purpose, but out of being misinformed or clueless or all kinds of ways. So everybody gets branded, whatever they are, and it goes both ways, and you can't make a point about the other side of the fence without then that side of the fence being offended, and it's sad. It's just gone on too long. To me, it's just been wrong from the start. And until that gets acknowledged, and I think that the real change that needs to happen is with people's hearts. If a heart would change, then you got a chance. But if things just change because of protesting, and if that's the way that it has to be, that's the way that it happened the last time. When the Jim Crow laws were done in, and segregation was lifted, and all those kinds of things. I was in school when we first integrated the schools, and it was a mess, but none of the kids had a problem. That's the beautiful part. None of the kids had a problem.
It's more the adults in it.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just.
So Molly Brown, this ballad. What's the background on that story?
Well, I was in a band years ago, and one of the guys in the band was a guy named Jimmy Wagner, and we really were crazy about each other. We went fishing all the time. We just really enjoyed each other's company. And back in the day, we used to play in the same band. And he had this one riff that he played all the time, and he sang this song, "Oh, Molly Brown, Molly Brown." It was just a blues song.
Yeah.
He was talking blues kind of thing. And so I took that lick that he played all the time and then made up this story about an interracial couple that it's really a love song. But
would you play it for us?
Sure, I'll try. I haven't done this in 100 years. But in the song, I put the town of Boley, Oklahoma. When I was a kid, I had friends in Paden, Oklahoma, and Prague, Oklahoma. But right next door to Prague, Oklahoma was Boley, Oklahoma. And this was the 60s. And it was an all-black town. And the sign at each end of town said, "If you're white, don't let the sun set on you in Boley." And so when you're a kid, you don't know about any of that kind of stuff. And I never understood it, but I knew there was an all-black town in Oklahoma called Boley. Molly Brown waits for me in a little one-horse town in Boley, Oklahoma, where white folks don't come round. I'm thinking about you, Molly. I'm forbidden to come round. Lord knows I love you, Molly. Molly Brown. Molly Brown, Molly Brown, lay down by my side. Show me how you spread your wings and let that pony ride. Lord, I'm crazy about you, Molly. I don't care that your skin is brown. Lord knows I need you, Molly, Molly Brown. We met down by the river. She wore her wedding gown. I never saw it coming. No one heard the sound. Lord, my daddy used both barrels and left me there to drown. Lord knows I'd die for Molly, Molly Brown. Molly Brown, don't you weep for me. I'm going to a place the Lord prepared for you and me. Oh, I'll meet you up in heaven, upon that holy ground. I'll be waiting for you, Molly Brown.
Dang. Talk about
good interracial murder ballad.
Talk about seeing the face of hate. There you go, right there, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the guy's own father kills him.
Yeah,
because he loves a black woman, and that'll never make any sense to me. Those kinds of feelings, to hate somebody because of the color of their skin.
Yeah. Price of Regret is another one that you've done.
Yeah,
and that was on the most recent album, right?
That was more recent, and it's kind of, my favorite line in there is where it talks about, we're blinded by sight. Close your eyes. And I always felt that way. So I think our eyes deceive us in that we prejudge something when we look at it. We see if someone's well-dressed. We see if someone's overweight. We see if someone looks like a bum. We see all this stuff. All this judgment comes before you ever actually engage. And so it says, you're black and I'm white. We're blinded by sight. Close your eyes and tell me the color of my skin. You do that, you wouldn't know. You would accept people. I think everyone would accept each other a little more honestly.
You do that one for us too?
Sure. Everyone knows the price of regret. The things in life we never forget. Haunted by what we've done wrong. Yearning for the pain to be gone. Some hide in the bottle, and some die in vain. Some wave a Bible, and some just go insane. Lay down your judgment, oh, lay down your shame. We're all God's children, and we all bleed the same. Black and I'm white, we're blinded by sight. Close your eyes and tell me the color of my skin. If we let today just pass away without kindness and forgiveness, there's no light. Everyone's broken, oh, everyone's scarred. All the things we needed wind up in the yard. Brothers and sisters, I mean you no harm. Healing's waiting in each other's arms. You're black and I'm white, blinded by sight. Close your eyes and tell me the color of my skin. If we let today just pass away without kindness and forgiveness, there's no light. Everyone knows the price of regret. Things in life we never forget.
Well, thank you for your time, and I go away thankful for that line about lay down your judgment, lay down your shame. and which I see, as I said earlier, kind of this sort of persistent thread in so much of what you've done. I'm thankful for it. I appreciate you doing that.
I'm a mutt, and I know it.
We've been talking to Vince Gill here in his home studio. Thanks, Vince, so much.
It's always good to see you, Lee.
Yeah, peace to you. You've been listening to Tokens, Public Theology, Human Flourishing, The Good Life. Thanks so much for joining us for this special interview with Vince Gill. Please remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and please remember to refer us to a fellow podcast listener. Got feedback? Well, we'd love to hear from you. Email us, text, or attach a voice memo and send to the address podcast@tokensshow.com. Thanks to all the stellar team that makes this podcast possible. Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Ashley Bain, Leslie Eiler Thompson, Carriet Harmon, Kara Fox, Zach and Maggie White, Phil Barnett. Special thanks to Aaron Morris of Morris Public Relations and Matt Roush, audio engineer at the studio of Vince Gill. Thanks for listening, and peace be unto thee. The Tokens Podcast is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.